Hey everyone, True here, and here's a quick review of the new character King Arthur, including her AI analysis, her pros, her cons, and in the end, a tier prediction. First, let's take a look at her threat levels, and the list of modifiers for that is a long one. If one enemy is poisoned, the threat level already increases by 20%. It increases further if a second one is poisoned. Then there's also a condition if there is an enemy on the field that has at least 1 kills, which is a very easy condition to fulfill. That's also a 1.2 multiplier. Then we also have a crappy monster in the back multiplier, which is also very easy with King Arthur to have because of her Regal pressure, which will constantly supply Maurice in the back. And then we also see that there's a 1.5 multiplier if she has 3 charges. So basically, if she is theoretically able to use her Regal Eclipse skill. Honestly, I could easily see all conditions met in many battles, and then it is a whopping 2.72 of hate, which is a lot. Of course, it drops to nearly 0 if her hold ground plus has been triggered and she is waiting for her turn. Moving on to her active skills, and the high level numbers here really only tell you half of the story because there are some hefty modifiers in the code. You may look at this and think, okay, Regal Comet Flare is her least picked skill, but indeed there are some modifiers in place if you have a Mori in the back, if there is an enemy that has a kill that basically propels this skill to the very front, sometimes maybe even ahead of the Regal Eclipse, but certainly ahead of the Regal Fangsbane. I mean, honestly, it is an instant skill, so in many cases it absolutely makes sense for her to prioritize this, but there are certain scenarios where this may be a disadvantage. A bit more on the Regal Eclipse skill, or rather the targeting on that skill, which is the skill that basically deletes an enemy unit if it has not defeated any units yet, regardless of the passives or actives that would usually keep it alive. And here we can see that King Arthur really likes to target hold ground units, especially hold ground plus units, especially the ones that have triggered the hold ground plus or that are otherwise preventing their death. For example, the ones like Brightlet Miller, if she has her Shield of Eldine down, then she likes to delete Brightlet Miller. Or, for example, Sleeping Beauty, if she is blocking death by having some thorns on allies, then she also likes to delete that unit. She doesn't really use it on imposters or anything like that, but in general, while there are some modifiers in place, I would have liked there to be some more actually to prevent some not ideal decisions, let's put it like that, but more on that now that we are moving on to the analysis section. But before we get into some cons, let's put one thing into the front. Of course, King Arthur is pretty much absolutely insane at dawn. So if she is on the field at the start of a battle, then all that kinds of King's Dawn bonuses activate, and that is including the crazy 50% TU reduction, the 50% damage increase permanently, and the 50% armor also kind of permanently. So you have all that in a unit. Yes, her TU are basically coming down to at most 65. That is a very important factor, I think. The damage one is also kind of nice because you have a lot of 750% attacks. And the armor, of course, is a nice to have. Yes, there are a lot of armor ignoring units out there now, but still some special skills often do not ignore this. So it is really nice to possibly avoid her triggering her hold ground plus all too quickly or all too often. Now, all that being said, and not to take away from this, Yes, she is insane at dawn, but as soon as she's not going in at dawn, if she is banished, if she's pushed back, she's she becomes pretty mid, I have to say. Because then her TU are really actually pretty long, except for her instant skill. The 100 to 130 time units on the skills are really nothing to write home about anymore at that point, especially because they only deal 500% damage if she doesn't get enraged through some other source. She is no longer permanently enraged at that point, and of course her armor is also gone at that point. And this could mean trouble because one thing remains. It doesn't really matter if she's coming in at dawn or later, or after being banished, after being pushed back, or if you're actually fielding her, not coming in at front, but from the reinforcements. One thing remains the same. It's the high hit level that we just saw earlier in the AI analysis. And with that kind of high hate, she will have a very hard time, especially if she doesn't have the King's Dawn protection mechanisms in place. Of course, she will still have the Hold Ground Plus, which is nice, especially in combination with her being pretty much able to unlimitedly reset that kind of Hold Ground Plus. The only thing she actually needs is kills for that, and all kinds of kill actually count. So even if it's just a Mori, this kill will reset her Hold Ground Plus and immediately heal her for 100% HP. Now, to get a kill, of course, she has to actually get a turn, and stuns might prevent her from it, especially in combination with the high hate. She might be a stun magnet. If you don't have a stun absorber like Light Anya on your team, she might get a lot of that. Well, it's not super bad because even if she gets stunned into oblivion, she still has the Hold Ground Plus protecting her until she actually gets the turn, and in the meantime she might be able to collect some charges for her Eclipse skill because the rest of her team might actually get some kills in. Now, of course, as soon as she gets the turn, she better hurry and get a kill in because otherwise it is not looking great. But especially it isn't looking great if she's actually asleep when she gets that turn. Her Hold Ground Plus was already triggered and then it is gone potentially. So we have a big sleep vulnerability on this King Arthur skill set, especially against someone like Sleeping Beauty and her Thorns. The question is, do you want to run King Arthur in a burn team where Sleeping Beauty wouldn't be much of an issue? Probably not. Maybe Nobunaga can help King Arthur, of course, and you might have some purifiers on your team as well. But all in all, sleep is a big one that you need to consider. Now, that being said, if she is awake, there are many ways for her to heal back. She doesn't even necessarily need to get a kill. There only needs to be a poisoned target that she can reach, and then she can basically draw 100% HP from that kind of Regal Fangsbane attack, or she kills someone with a skill. And all three of her damage dealing skills are skills that can definitely get a kill in, but they all need spirit. She's generally a quite spirit-hungry unit. Yes, she has the Regal Pressure, which produces 2 spirit, which is all nice and dandy, especially if her TU are halved and she has 50 TU for that skill. But other than that, yes, we have the Instant Comet Flare, which has 1 TU and only 1 spirit cost, but the Regal Fangsbane already with 2 spirit costs is becoming a bit hefty. And then, of course, the Regal Eclipse skill, which costs 3 spirit, which makes sense because it's a super powerful skill. Of course, it can delete any unit. This is especially juicy, of course, if it is a unit that cannot come back, and especially if it's a unit that is more of a supporter and not a killer, because of that big condition that this unit that the Eclipse targets can't have defeated an ally yet. What's also nice about this Eclipse skill is that yes, you need 3 charges to unlock it, which only charges you if you actually defeat non-conjured units on the enemy team. So that is gonna take a while potentially if you're not steamrolling your opponent. But once you actually get to the Eclipse and you have the Spirit available and you use the Eclipse, you will immediately have one charge again, because the Eclipse skill counts as a kill and a charge for King Arthur. So you only need 2 more charges after that to yet again be able to use the Eclipse. But I alluded to this earlier in my initial review already. Her AI might sometimes screw up the targeting of the Eclipse skill. It is especially annoying, of course, if she targets someone like Storm Jean, who immediately gets revived again by Storm Michaela. Then it is really tough to waste all these charges, waste all that spirit. And that's not the only scenario where the Eclipse might go off the wrong way, especially because she kind of likes to target the block death guards, like maybe Storm Michaela, or actually Morphe, potentially even. So yeah, there can be some not so ideal stuff with her AI. And another thing that is related to that is her instant command flare skill, which might be prioritized a little bit too much in some situations, especially if her hold ground plus has already been triggered and she might be poisoned or burning. If she uses the instant skill and she doesn't get a kill with it, she will just die. So maybe in these cases, it might be better for her to actually use something like the Regal Fangsbane if it is available, but sometimes she will still use the instant command flare instead and die. So this is a bit problematic, to say the least, which is unfortunate, because in general the instant command flare is an absolutely insanely strong skill, and the fact that she can basically just rotate through it every 50 time units if she is still with the King's Dawn mechanic on the field is pretty crazy. I mean, 500% or rather 750% damage to an enemy that has already defeated one enemy is already a big damage output to that enemy, but she can also use it by just burning a Mori in the background, which is also readily available if she is using the Regal Pressure. And all that for 1 time unit, 1 spirit, 50 time unit lock. Really strong skill, but it doesn't heal her. She needs to get a kill with it so that it actually heals her and also resets her hold ground plus. Now, all that being said, let's move on to the conclusion. There's been a lot of talk about this unit being absolutely top tier and the new number 1, etc., the very best unit. Many people claiming that even at 1 copy, she can be an absolute destroyer, which I don't want to doubt, but I'm not convinced, honestly. At 1 copy, I don't think she's all that great. Like most or all DPS, she's also a unit that really needs that full awakening to absolutely shine. The exception maybe being on newer servers, or if you're just starting your rise through the arena ranks. Now, according to the poll that I posted on my channel, 69% of my viewers are thinking that King Arthur is going to be in the SSS tier. And after we went through her pros and cons, I think it is easy to see why many think that way. She is pretty insane at the start, but I think there are a few holdups with all the cons that I mentioned that might limit her a bit. I personally think she might not go any higher than SS tier if she doesn't get further support from some new units that are to be released in the future. Because yes, she's a great unit, insane damage output in a short period of time, especially if you have a fellowship advantage, then King Arthur, I think, becomes really strong. But the problem is that the kind of Dawn mechanic really restricts her to really have to be in the first 4. And the question is how well she will integrate into the kind of burn sleep setups that are currently in the meta, or if she is powerful enough to kind of lift herself up and make an entirely new kind of meta, which I think she actually can do as a reasonable alternative. but I don't think as a universal pick for the front, because there's just these other established options, and in comparison to these other established options, King Arthur cannot just be put into a later platoon, because then her skill set is kind of meh, as I mentioned earlier. And last but not least, I think with that kind of dawn mechanic, we've seen it with Dark Snow White before, who was the very best DPS 2 years ago, and who also, funnily enough, might actually benefit from this King Arthur release now. I mean, yes, King Arthur is a kind of blood unit, but also the kind of hate level and banish draw in from Dark Snow White could make her a reasonable companion to the field of King Arthur at dawn. But Dark Snow White also had that kind of dawn mechanic. Of course, it was just a very weak dawn in comparison to what we have now, but she had that kind of two Morris in the back at dawn, and once she was no longer in the top tier, she fell off very quickly because people were just benching her instead of putting her into later platoons where she could still produce a little bit of good use. That is to say, I'm a bit concerned about King Arthur's half-life. But anyways, super strong unit. I'm really curious to see how she will change the meta. Let me know your thoughts about her in the comments. Thanks to Nizetto and Lance Chairs for the materials used in this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to become a true carrot. I really appreciate it a lot, especially because these kinds of deep dive reviews don't seem to be favored much by the algorithm. So yeah, thank you, and as always, thanks for watching.